point of privilege, Sachs wore this hat last week. What's this brand? Is this a Montclair hat you're wearing?
Yeah. And actually, did you see that tweet? It's
trending.
It started trending after I wore it. So
it's sold out, dude. You sold out the Montclair hat. So we have no advertising.
I feel like if we're not going to do any advertising on the show, we should at least get free clothes. We get to pick through them, wear what we like.
I know. Where's my cut? Where's my cut as an influencer?
The tweet basically said that I name dropped Loro Piana and sent it through the roof, and then Sachs name dropped Montclair. Both brands obviously are Italian. Both entrepreneurs we know very well. And so I asked Nat, I said, Nat, can you basically send this tweet over to them so maybe they can give us free clothes? I haven't heard
I'll
that
take
yet.
free
Let's
stuff.
get the grift going, boys. Now we're talking. Now we got some bestie grifts going. Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, this is his cup of tea.
Speaking of grifts.
I do like Montclair the way that Chamath likes Loro Piano.
Just so you guys know, at the birthday, Jason, that you missed,
Are we allowed to talk
we
about
played poker. We had a surprise birthday party for me. Nat threw it. Sachs showed up. Freeberg showed up. Their wives showed up. It was incredible. J. Cal basically stiff-armed me.
I'm very sorry. It was by the way, that came together 4 days before your birthday. So just so you know.
Well, you know what? Kevin Hart showed up.
Give us the best one-liner. Which one landed?
Oh, no. J. Cal, you have no idea. These guys roasted me. It was fucking incredible. But the best of it was at the end, K. Hart gets up with no preparation and skewers everybody. Freeberg, I mean, what did you think of like Kevin's roast?
I've never laughed harder. He was so funny. He's like, my wife walked in here and she looks at me and she's like, these guys. It was so funny. Bleep that shit out, Nick, but it was so funny. He dropped line after line after line.
He's a ringer. He's a professional.
Well, he's maybe the funniest person in the world.
And then Sachs had to come after him.
Yeah, exactly. Xander, I don't know why Xander was the MC. But he should have saved Kevin Hart for last. But instead, he calls up K Hart in the middle.
Sachs was so tilted.
Okay, so wait. So I couldn't make it because I had Burning Man. Xander does the emceeing. Then Kevin Hart, what you're saying is, just to fill in the audience here so they can understand it. Kevin Hart comes in. He gives this incredible ad-lib roast. And then Sachs has to go after him?
Yeah. And Xander did it on purpose. First of all, Xander's as funny as a root canal. That's a great
sandbag. What a sandbag.
Funny as a root canal.
Xander's as funny as a root canal. He should not have been the MC. So yes, we did miss you, J. Cal. You should have been the MC. Second, K Hart should have been left for last, obviously.
Of course.
But Xander, Xander being a good liberal couldn't censor me outright. So he had me go after K Hart. That's like the next best thing.
Did you steal his documents? Did you steal all his jokes and put them in your...
I had all these like jokes written. I just threw them out the window because I can't, what am I going to do? I'm not going to deliver jokes after Kevin Hart. So I just told a story, you know.
Kevin Hart like killed. I mean, the room was rolling.
I mean, that's like that's like getting punched by Mike Tyson and being like, "Oh my God, that hurt." It's like, yeah, it's Mike Tyson.
Let your winners ride.
Rain Man, David Sachs.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, besties. Queen of Quinoa. We were at the Code Conference. We had the poker game. It was the last one after 20 years.
Big shout out to Kara Swisher. Big shout out to Kara Swisher.
I want to say to Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher, because they did the conference many years together. Congratulations on a 20-year run. They're not going to do it. Kara's not going to do it next year, but my friend Jim Bankoff, who runs Vox, is going to run it next year. So congratulations to him and Kara for a great run in all things D. They had Steve Jobs at the first speaker, and you can look it up. I got to ask him a question.
Jake Al, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were there when Gates and Jobs did that speech together.
Unbelievable! What an incredible legacy that she documented all of this.
Code is incredible. Like, I mean, the amount of memories I have from that place is incredible.
That's great. And so we'll see where the poker game goes next year. Probably the All In Summit.
And to think the All In Summit could have been that.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I'm not saying that I'll be hosting the Code Conference next year, but they're looking for an impresario. This is the problem with this pod is we're drawing too many high-profile people in now. But interestingly, Freeberg and I, we now have the press wants the press are trying to do a profile of the pod, and so we had 3 or 4 different press outlets now. I won't say which ones, but have all asked us to do like a sit for a profile. We've said no. But just because
I said, why don't we do a profile of them? Who's to make them the media, you know?
Well, I mean,
exactly. Our competitors want to do a piece on us. Why would we cooperate
got the
with
audience?
that? You know, it's going to be a hit piece.
It'd probably be a hit piece. Yeah,
of course, because we're stealing influence and clicks and views away from them.
It's definitely.
And besides, they're ideologically motivated anyway, so they're message police.
Sex, you don't think you're ideologically motivated?
Listen, if you contradict the official narrative, then they write a hit piece about you. That's how they try to enforce discipline.
It's true, actually, but not all outlets. True. I like the independent ones. I do have to say, like, this whole, Substack movement in independent artists or independent journalists becoming even more indie. In fact, Kara Swisher is more indie now. She left the New York Times specifically because they were, giving her a hard time about certain guests or certain conversations. And now she's, doing her podcast independently with Vox publishing it for her. So you're seeing more and more of the voices go independent.
New Republic is doing a hit piece on me right now. I have no idea why. I mean, it's the same
I know that.
thing.
They emailed me and I CC'd them and I was like, here's my official comment. I can't wait to visit Sachs when he's in the White House in 20 years. And the guy's like, so you're saying Sachs is running for president? I'm saying, no, I'm saying that you don't understand a joke. That was a joke.
Yeah, and then after you copied me, then they're like, "Oh yeah, we were reaching out to David too to get in." No,
yeah, and they hadn't reached out to you yet, right?
They hadn't reached out anyway.
Yeah, so they were going a little sneak. They were trying to get me to talk about you. I don't have
time. I don't have time to talk to them.
New Republic's a nice. That would be a nice profile, I think. Nobody reads anyway, Sachs. They're going to look at the picture.
Used to be. If it were Michael Kinsley running the New Republic, I'd be happy to take the time, but it's not that anymore. It's just another left wing rag that's into policing speech. They sent us a bunch of questions like, why?
Read the questions.
Well, I don't have them in front of me, but they're basically like, why did you support the recall of Chesa Boudin, stuff like that. And my, PR person got back to him and said, have you seen the All In Pod? Have you read David's Twitter? Because he explained this abundantly for the 2 years he was advocating for
every
this.
week we talked
every
about
week
it.
We talked about this.
There's about 8,000 words sitting there in the transcripts.
Right. He's like, oh, he talked about it in the pod. The
guy didn't listen to the pod?
He's like, he tweeted about this. No, he just thinks I'm like some right-wing donor who was trying to get Chesa kicked out. That kind of narrative, So I'm like, this is a total waste of my time. Go read all my tweets, go watch the All In Pod, and then come back with any questions that haven't been answered.
That's just lazy reporting on the New Republic's part. Why would you do a profile if you didn't actually read it?
I got better things
to do. Two of you are having a serious conversation while Freeberg is fucking around with his backgrounds and all.
What is his background? What is that?
It's a future city in Saudi Arabia.
Who else is planning on doing a hit piece about us?
Okay, so the information reached out, and we said no.
Are you saying this actually on the show right now?
I guess. If we
I think this is the way we should deal with all inbound press inquiries. Is we'll tell them no and then discuss it on the pod.
Yeah,
if they want to quote, listen to our pod and then transcribe what we say on this pod.
Or reverse it.
My quote for the New Republic is that if Michael Kinsley were still the editor, I'd be happy to spend my valuable time talking to you.
But you feel they won't. You feel it won't be a fair profile.
Of course, it's not going to be fair. They're the speech police now. And the fact that he didn't even know that I wasn't just a donor on the Chesa Boudin thing. I was the first person that I'm aware of, at least within Silicon Valley, who called out Chesa Boudin for the horrible job he was doing.
I mean, that was bipartisan. By the way, it's not like David Sachs is one of the 3% of San Franciscans who are Republican. He's not able to vote for the 69% of people who voted Chesa Boudin out. So, you can't spin that one.
You're categorizing me as, just a partisan. That's not really how I come at these issues.
Can we go back to your quotes? So, that was your comment for New Republic. J-Cal, do you have a comment for New York Times and then
no, it started with Eric. I got to get fair. Eric Newcomer, who's awesome, who worked at The Information, started his own Substack, which is really good, by the way. And he comes on my other pod. He's awesome. And so I'm going to be a guest on his pod because I promised him and he does my pod, but I'm not going to be a guest. My philosophy is, I told him, I said, you can have me as a guest, but it can't be more than 10% all in because I don't want it to become an all in profile. We agreed as a group. We're not doing an all in profile right now. So up to 10% can be about all in, but the other 90% has got to be my other projects. And he said, totally fine. He understands. But he asked first. And actually, I would be inclined to do with him because if we were going to do it. But then
what do they need? I mean, we create hours and hours of content every month.
And the drama's out here for everybody to,
I don't understand. What do you need our cooperation for?
I think you want to maybe frame and get a couple of
sleep.
No, you just want to get a couple of quotes that are unique, so that it's worth reading the
These
story.
two guys have shoved their heads up each other's asses.
Totally, it's like a serpent,
Wow.
a never-ending serpent.
You're clear up here. Clean bill of health, Sachs. So anyway, Eric Newcomer asked, and then the information
Just give
asked,
him
and
your
then
co- give him
Kevin
your
Roos.
comment.
No, the New York Times just asked, right?
Kevin
What do you
Roos.
say to the- okay, what do
He
you
was
want
a
to say to the New York Times?
nice friend.
Make your comment.
My comment to the New York Times is, enjoy the pod while it lasts.
All
We're
right,
trying to
let's
keep
keep
it together. I mean, I'll tell you the other big issue is I got approached by a couple of, by two different people who want to represent the pod. They say there's $7.5 million in advertising we're leaving on the table, by the way, 150 a week.
Good.
What?
Pass.
Okay.
Good.
And literally
Good.
that was
I
actually,
want that
was,
number to grow to 10 million, to 20 million.
you guys are killing me. You realize I would have a plane if you guys just let me sell the fucking heads on this thing. I could get like $1.5 million in jet suite.
Yeah, you would have a plane if you just did one other thing. You're doing 100
actually-
different things. Just do one thing.
I'll tell you what it is.
You'd have a plane if you were smarter.
That's not nice, Sax. That's not nice. I would have a plane if I got luckier. I will say, whoever said this is going to help our core businesses, and that's the reason, I think it might have been you, Chamath. I am raising my fourth fund. I am doing it 506c, which is public. I tweeted about it. I had 1,200 people sign up for the webinar. And this means I might have to increase the size of my fourth venture fund because so many people listen to this pod and want to hang out. So thank you to everybody who listens to the pod. I think
Good for you, bro. I'm proud
well,
of you.
I mean, it's just nice, I struggled to raise the first couple funds. You guys backed me, but like I couldn't break through as a solo GP with the big LPs. But I'm hoping to get one big LP this time, and I'm going to be oversubscribed with all the high net worth individuals and everything. But I'd like to get like a Memorial Sloan Kettering or somebody doing cancer research just to feel good about it.
I just want to say that I supported JCal as a friend. In fact, I was the first LP check in your fund,
yeah,
but that does not mean that I
endorse
endorse
it in any way.
or that anybody else should come in.
I mean, whatever. I don't want to say the performance, but you're doing okay. Let's leave it at that. Yeah.
And I would like to say that I was not the first, but I was the biggest.
You did pretty big, yeah, absolutely.
And I will say that I'm still waiting for that moment to join you guys in Jake House.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
We will all have a
and I'll
party
just
together.
keep coming to your LP meetings and entertaining your LPs. Thanks, pal.
Entertaining.
Wait, is JCal an investor in production board?
No.
We've done a syndicate together.
You are my smallest investor. You are Bill Lee. I don't know how that happened, but yeah.
Let's get to work, guys.
Do you guys want to talk about the Queen, the passing of the Queen, real quick before we start, or is that?
I would like to. Yeah,
Go ahead,
I was
Chamath.
born in Sri Lanka. I was raised in Canada, and now I live in the United States. Obviously, I've been a citizen of all three countries. So, 2 of the 3 countries, I've been a subject to the Queen. I mean, I'm part of the Commonwealth, and I just want to say, it was really sad for me. Like these last couple of days when I saw that she was sick and then she had passed. I got to be honest with you, like it really touched me. She is I can't describe to you guys, for someone who is part of that realm, how important she is as a person. And then, if you've seen, the show on Netflix, it kind of romanticizes a little bit, but, she has seen 17 prime ministers. She's seen so many presidents. She has seen the history of the world, the modern world being made in front of her. So yeah, I'm a little sad, and I think she's an incredible person. And even if you don't agree necessarily with monarchies in general, I think you have to be super positive.
Or the
about her.
history of imperialism. There's a lot of people that are kind of using this as a moment to be negative, right?
Jamaica wants to become a republic. Australia wants to become a republic. They'll prosecute that in due time. But for right now, I just think that we have to celebrate this incredible woman who lived to an incredible age, who saw incredible things, and who dedicated her entire life to the public service and lived it totally neutrally, which in today's world, nobody else does. Everybody else takes a point of view.
That's a good point.
Everybody else tries to basically create a schism. She never did that in 70 years as the Queen.
Yeah, like very stoic and a symbol of service, not a symbol of dictatorship, right? I mean, there seems to be a very different role that she's taken as a monarch than I think what has maybe historically been the role, which is
She's incredible.
Pretty profound, right?
It's extraordinary that somebody would put 70 years of service and be that diligent and I think stoic and there for her people and to the people who are, suffering and grieving,
That word you said really resonated with me. Like, diligent is such a great word because it's like you're disciplined, you put in hard work, you're focused on a long-term goal, and then you're selfless.
Yes.
Not many people, Jake, how you know this, exhibit that at all, but then definitely don't exhibit it over 70 years.
It's extraordinary. And, it's, I know a lot of people are grieving right now. So you have our,
as a citizen of the monarchy, of the Commonwealth, rather, I am pro Queen Elizabeth, and it deeply saddens me to see that she passed away.
All right, listen, we got to talk about winter is coming. I'm not talking about Game of Thrones. Let's talk about something serious that's going on here. And we don't like to be too repetitive here, but I think we correctly predicted that, if this Ukraine, I think maybe Sachs, you pointed this out, if this Ukraine.
What do you mean we, Kimosabi?
All right, listen, I'm trying to give you fucking credit and you interrupted me. Can you just take the fucking win? You're such a miserable bastard. I try to give you one fucking win.
Okay, finish what you're saying.
And you cut me off. All right, listen. We've been talking about this Ukraine thing. Sachs correctly predicted if this goes to winter, this is going to get acute. And of course, right on cue here, we have it. Russia has essentially cut off gas to Europe right now by claiming that the Nord Stream 1, the North pipeline that Russia built that goes under the Baltic Sea, they basically say a turbine's broken in it magically at this point in time, right before winter. This turbine broke, according to Putin, and he needs a turbine. And if they give him a turbine, he said he's going to turn it back on. This in the face of Europe saying they were going to cap the price of Russian gas. I don't know how that works exactly, that you tell people what they can charge for gas. But Russian gas shipments, which Germany is particularly dependent on, have fallen 89% since last year. And the price of liquefied natural gas in Europe is 4 times the level a year ago, and 8 times the level of the U.S. Obviously, we have gotten incredibly lucky to find all this natural gas here, and we are a huge exporter of natural gas and oil in the United States, so we're good. This is the highest power prices have been in 3 decades, and the perfect storm is not limited to oil and the Russia and the Ukraine war. France's 56 nuclear power plants are running at half strength because of shutdowns over corrosion problems. And as we talked about maybe 2 episodes, droughts have undermined hydroelectric power because of these.
That's not the main issue here. The main issue is the cut off of Russian gas.
There is a perfect storm here.
It's not just that. 40% of Europe's energy consumption comes from Russian natural gas. 40%. And so you could see variants. There's a base load requirement for lighting and electricity, and then there's industrial production, and then there's heating and cooling. Heating and cooling demand is linearly tied to the number of degrees above or below 65 Fahrenheit on average. And so as the temperature goes up, people turn air conditioners on. As the temperature goes below 65, they turn their heaters on. So there's a linear demand for power consumption at those. So number one is you could you could either cut base load, which is lighting and basic kind of operations. Number 2 is cut industrial production, which is already happening. A lot of fertilizer plants are shutting down in the country that are dependent on in the continent that are dependent on natural gas. And number 3 is this heating and cooling, and that really ends up being kind of a market-driven function, which is how pricey is this stuff because there's limited supply. So you could in a normal year see fluctuations around 5, 10, 15%, maybe with good kind of action and behavior. 40% of energy being cut is a massive, massive problem. There will be significant price climbs for the kind of variable demand in heating and cooling and so on. But for the price to go up by 6x, 7x, 8x, 10x, 15x over normal prices for someone is unbearable by the average household, unbearable by the average small business, unbearable by the average small building. And so it's causing critical failure across the economy, across the currencies, across debt markets. And there's real concern that ultimately the shutting off of 40% of the energy supply to the continent leading into winter is coming, where energy demand spikes because of the need for heating, is going to cause real kind of problems. So there's the cataclysmic problem of people actually being able to heat their homes. There's the industrial problem of parts of the economy shutting down. And then there's the currency problem of the governments needing to step in and bail out industry, buy super expensive gas, give it to their citizens and their businesses at a discounted price. and seeing their national and sovereign debt skyrocket, which is now expected to happen. And as a result, the British pound is trading at its lowest level since 1985. And as a result, people are rushing to the street from Prague to Cologne, Germany, even in London, proclaiming that the governments aren't doing enough, number one, to stall the rate of inflation, to make energy prices cheaper through action by having the government subsidize. And number three, which I think was inevitable and is now becoming kind of the surprise factor to the Ukraine crisis, citizens are saying, end this war now. Get to the table with Russia, come up with a settlement, and get the heck out of the Ukraine. By the way, that's not everyone saying it, just to be clear, but there is this rising, rioting, protesting behavior happening across Europe, particularly in Eastern Europe, as a result of the Ukraine war. And so we're seeing, I think a big shift in attitude and a big shift in kind of the societal perception of this war, particularly in Europe, because they're so acutely feeling the effects, and we are not in the US. They're acutely feeling the effects, and they're saying, we need to stop this war now. We need to get out of the way. We need to let Russia turn the gas pipeline back on, and we need to figure out a resolution. Stop supporting Ukraine. And
Chamath,
that's a voice that did not exist very loudly at the beginning, and it's starting to swell.
Running out of food or, running out of heat to keep your kids warm. I mean, these are pretty acute situations. Chamath, what's the vibe in the Middle East about this? Are they looking at it and seeing it as an opportunity? Are they looking at it and seeing it as, a manageable crisis? And what do they consider their participation in this to be?
There's a very structured framework for energy production, which is OPEC and OPEC plus. And, they have done not just the Middle East, but frankly, the Middle East plus United States, the best job possible to basically get the maximum demand so that there's as much energy as possible. The reasons that Europe are in an energy crisis really should be discussed honestly. So, number one, an entire continent essentially allowed a 16-year-old girl to dictate their energy policy. And when Greta Thunberg was able to shame an entire continent into basically walking away from nuclear and not really evaluating how you can actually have energy independence, what they did was they put Europe in an incredibly fragile position. And at the beginning of this war, it wasn't clear how much damage the lack of Russian energy would do to the European economy. But now it's absolutely clear.
How did they not see that, Chamath?
We said it on the pod. We said it on the pod in February.
How did they not? I mean, Trump said it years ago. I mean,
the first thing we said.
How is it not obvious?
The problem is you had these, look, to be honest, you had these two goofballs. You had a goofball on the left, which was a 16-year-old girl who knew nothing. And you had a goofball on the right, which is a president whose language turned people off, even though the message that he was delivering was 100% right. When Trump went to the United Nations, he was clear, he was precise, and in hindsight, and I'm saying this as a Democrat, he was right about the German reliance on Russian gas and the European reliance on gas.
What did they think would happen?
The important thing was the reaction. Remember the German delegation snickering while he was talking?
They were laughing. They were laughing. But we're missing the real lesson. The real lesson is that in all of our haste to basically overtly judge Trump because of his delivery and his personal style or whatever, we ran towards a 16-year-old person who has no rooting in science or technology to dictate the energy policy of an entire continent. I mean, she was nominated for a Nobel Prize. Just to remind you guys, this is how insane all of these people were. So in an effort to virtue signal to the hilt and beyond, what we essentially did, what the entire world did, was turn a blind eye to science and turn a blind eye to mathematics and simple understanding of supply and demand. And so now you have this situation where the entire continent of Europe is probably on the precipice of, at the minimum, a recession. But frankly, there's a lot of scenarios where it could be meaningfully worse. And I think what it does is ultimately it has forced the Russian endgame. And that Russian endgame is essentially the following, which is that Germany will probably be the first to capitulate. but it'll be the combination of the United States and Europe who negotiate some kind of a settlement.
They have to fold.
And the reason, well, without calling it folding, I would just say there's a settlement. And the reason the settlement is necessary is you're going to start to impact tens of millions of people's lives in an incredibly arduous way. And those people are asking their leaders to tell them why it's worth it. That's why you're seeing protests all around Europe. People have decided that this war has gotten 2 or 3 steps beyond what they thought they were getting into, and that it was shining light on a whole set of decisions that never should have been made.
Sachs, I think what people most want to know, and I'll go to Freeberg after Sachs. Freeberg, I think people are going to want to know, how do they close this gap in terms of the 40% dependency? So you can start thinking about that. But Sachs, how do we resolve this issue with Russia without enabling them? Because nobody wants to enable them and reward them for invading countries. But here we are. They didn't settle this thing in the whatever 9 months we're in now. And they don't have any more cards to play. They need heat. People can't freeze to death in Germany. So they're going to have to fold in some way. And it doesn't seem like there's any gap that can be closed here in terms, there's not enough firewood to go around. It's all these stories about stockpiling firewood. That doesn't seem practical. Sure, you could reduce consumption by 10, 20, maybe 25%. That does seem reasonable, but there's still a huge gap here. So what's the end game, Sachs? I mean,
well, first, just to put some numbers on this, there's a good report by Goldman Sachs called Europe's Energy Crisis is at a Tipping Point. This came out on September 8th. And it says here that the price of natural gas in Europe, it used to just be 20 euros per megawatt hour. It's now above 200 per megawatt hour. So we're at 10 times the 10-year average in the market, and winter isn't even here. So, Europe is the Titanic. Winter is the iceberg. The main difference between this and the Titanic story is that everyone can see the iceberg. And yet no one is really changing course. So Liz Truss, the new prime minister of the UK, said that Ukraine can depend on UK for support in the long term. Olaf Scholz said that Germany will support Ukraine as long as it takes. Macron, from France, said that NATO will stand together and prevent Russia from winning the war. So, leader after leader is doing the opposite of what you and Chamath have just said, which is try to figure out a compromise. In fact, in the last week or so, new information came out about actions Boris Johnson took back in March or April when there was discussion about a peace deal about a month into the war? It turns out that Boris Johnson went to Ukraine and said, no deal, do not take the deal. We need to weaken Putin and Russia, not compromise with them. So the fact of the matter is that the European leaders are increasingly out of touch with their own people. The agenda they are serving is not the agenda of, or the desire of their people to basically stay warm in the winter or pay reasonable energy bills. They are serving this larger foreign policy agenda. This is why you're seeing people in the streets in Czechoslovakia and these other countries. And this is why the crisis will only grow in winter. I think you guys are just assuming there's going to be a compromise. I'm not sure that's true. These leaders are stubborn. So this is why, for example, we've already now seen in the UK, Boris Johnson lost power, although Liz Truss basically has the same policy. Mario Draghi has basically lost in Italy. Bulgaria replaced their PM. So the leaders, the dominoes are starting to fall in Europe. And I think there's going to be a lot more of this. And who knows what governments we're going to end up with in Europe in
What's
6
the end
months.
game then? I mean, what do you predict will happen? You think they're going to hold their ground and not have a compromise?
So Chamath pointed out the mistakes that these leaders made following Greta Thunberg. I think there's another mistake they've made, which is I think all of these leaders have pulled a Tony Blair. Do you remember Tony Blair? Tony Blair was the Bill Clinton of the UK. After Margaret Thatcher, he was the first Labour PM to get elected. He was incredibly talented as a politician, and he was very popular in the UK until he did one thing. You know what that one thing was? He went along with George W. Bush's Iraq war. The people of the UK did not want to get involved in that war, and Blair acted as W's lapdog and went along with it and bought into all of the lies about that war. And today he has zero credibility in the UK. It's really actually a sad story. I think that these European leaders are making a similar kind of mistake with respect to Biden's proxy war against Russia. Now, let's go back. I want to go back to a point you made, Jason, and then I'll turn to Freeberg, which is you talked about the fig leaf, that the Russians are blaming this on a turbine. I don't think that's even really true anymore. I mean, the Russians have basically said—
Putin's lying, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think the Russians have basically said that, listen, this is about your sanctions. It's about sanctions.
It's sanctions and a turbine. It's like, pick one.
Right.
It can't
but listen,
be both.
But the point I'm trying to make it, look, obviously this is retaliation by the Russians. The problem is the stupidity of Western leaders in not thinking there's going to be retaliation. I mean, all you're hearing right now from Western leaders is indignation that Russia would play the only card they have, the card that was obvious they were going to play. Meanwhile, look at what we've done. So you've got administration officials talking about the fact that we have commandos on the ground in Ukraine. You've got administration officials bragging about the fact that we are helping to paint targets on the backs of Russian generals so they can be killed. You have administration officials boasting about providing the artillery spotting so we could sink the Moskva, the Russian flagship. I'll provide receipts for all of these things, okay? You've got Biden saying that Putin cannot remain in power. You've got Lindsey Graham saying he needs to be assassinated.
Hold on a second. Let's go forward. How does it resolve?
You've got Lindsey Graham saying that he needs to be assassinated like Caesar. You've got the U.S. appropriating $40 billion.
Too hawkish.
Hold on a second. In weapons to Ukraine. So my point is this, okay? The U.S. and the Western alliance, they are doing everything in Ukraine except pulling the triggers, okay? They are doing the artillery spotting. Okay, so the point is, we are in a proxy war with Russia. Yes. What did you expect was going to happen? Okay. These leaders are not even playing checkers.
What should happen?
Hold on a second.
Hold
on a second.
You're in the review mirror.
Forget about playing chess. They're not even playing checkers, meaning they cannot even anticipate what the Russians are going to do next. It was imminently predictable that the Russians were going to turn off European gas and create this crisis. So what should they have done? What they should have done was work out a peace deal.
I know that, but we're kind of repeating the same position you have every week here. I'm trying to get to going forward. So Freeberg, what should we do going forward here? Both on an energy basis and a political basis. That's the thing. I get the sort of breakdown of what occurred here in your position, Sachs. But what do you think Freeberg should happen going forward? How do we resolve this?
There's an acute energy shortfall. You can't just make that up. You can't convert oil into natural gas to heat people's homes. It's impossible structurally right now in the time frame that it's needed.
So what should the U.S. and what should the EU be doing now that they're not doing?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be this inevitability that we're going to need to broker a deal with Russia. And what I think you'll see over the next couple of months, particularly because winter is coming, is you need to, there's going to be a lot of saving face. And so I think, I've always said from the beginning, I think that Putin's calculus is to go as far and as deep as he can go so that he could eventually negotiate himself back out in a way that leaves him with what he originally wanted in the first place. And I think that there are certain strategic regions and certain strategic assets that it's pretty clear and evident he wanted. And if he's gotten enough in addition to that, he can give up the additional part and he can get sanctions lifted and he can turn gas back on and be left with what he actually wanted and ultimately get out of this thing. And then the face saving will be from the West will be, hey, we got him to give up this, we got him to give up this, we got him to agree to non-incursion, and there'll be some sort of, hey, we got Putin knocked down a bit, and, we got him out of there. We did it, we won, high five. Meanwhile, Putin's smiling because he got exactly what he wanted. I think that's where this is all going to end up over the next several months. I think that's if it doesn't, there's going to be significant rioting and civil unrest in Europe, and there will be a significant economic effect. Because so much of Germany and so much of the broader continent is dependent on a stable, low-cost or lower enough cost energy supply for the production of things that are produced in Europe. And if those things can't be produced profitably because the end market won't pay for it, the economy will be shattered. Economies will be shattered, and people will be really unhappy. Food will climb, and the currency will be destroyed. And you know what happens when currencies get destroyed? All imports become inflated in price. And then you have inflation. If there isn't a resolution in the next few weeks, there will be civil unrest. There will be a really cataclysmic concerning economic effect.
And you think that forces the governments to just fold to Putin and give him some
and I think the thing that we don't know for sure is what are they going to do from a face-saving move perspective? What are they going to say they got
the Ukraine
from Putin?
Or the West alliance?
Plus Ukraine. We are going to have to plow so much money into the Ukraine to make them feel okay about what we're going to ask them to do in order to remove or to end the crisis. And so there's going to be this huge check, this huge investment in Ukraine, the Western investment in Ukraine, the support mechanism for the country, for the people left behind, in order to get this thing resolved. And so my guess is huge amount of money from the West and EU going into Ukraine. Ukraine agrees to let Putin keep some regions, some assets. Putin agrees to remove himself from certain regions and give up certain assets. Sanctions are partially lifted, but they're partially lifted enough to get the flow of gas going and to get the economy turning again.
Chamath, any final thoughts here as we turn around third base here on this, of lessons learned and how to
Nick,
avoid this in the future?
You may want to find the clip, Nick, from July where I said the tip of the spear in the fall was going to be the European energy crisis.
Oil is at $105 a barrel. Russia is basically trying to break the back of Europe by now messing with their nat gas supplies. The German energy minister yesterday said that if that happens, it could be a contagion equivalent to Lehman Brothers with respect to energy. You're already starting to see food riots, food insecurity, energy insecurity, rampant inflation, sovereign defaults. And you have to ask yourself, like, how are we going to really tourniquet this whole thing and prevent a much bigger contagion like Freeberg just talked about? If Russia decides to play hardball against Europe or America, we better hope that it's a mild winter, because very quickly you can go from plus 1 million barrels to minus 2 in a heartbeat.
Yeah, my final thoughts are the following, which is that I think that the European system is going to be put under stress because there are really a bunch of different countries with very different incentives right now, where some countries are in desperate need of energy. Some countries can probably stave it off for a little bit longer. Other countries are so adamantly focused on their position on Russia over and above any source of energy that they may need or don't have. So I just think like this is a really good point to take a step back and realize that in all of these conflicts, sadly, whenever you have like all of these very complicated countries fighting very complicated wars, it's really important to understand what these trade-offs are, because ultimately what we're learning in Europe is that irrespective of what you morally and ethically believe is right in the Ukraine, the minute that it affects you, and Jason, you've said this, what is it, like you're only one meal away from a revolution? Is that,
it's 3 meals away. Yeah. And I think it would be, you're only like 5 days away from having no heat before people riot on the street. It's probably the equivalent.
But that's the lesson, which is that at the end of the day, it is when you're in a position of comfort, you can focus on forward and outlooking moral attributes and ethical perspectives that matter. But the minute that you are affected at home, where you cannot take care of your children or heat your house, all bets are off. And I think this just goes to show you that if you're going to sort of engage in proactive foreign policy, you need to make sure that domestically you don't have any Achilles heels. And Europe had a massive Achilles heel, which is energy. And then, the minute that they were
they've stress tested it now. They're going to have to take this much more seriously going into next year, because they've enabled a madman.
That is the dominant narrative. There is a simplistic binary that has been set up that this is a war between autocracy and democracy, and that's all there is to it. And my point is that this conflict has always been more complicated than that. Okay. And if you really want to understand this conflict, you have to go back and understand the history of it. And, the American media and the British media, they basically act as if this whole thing began on February 24th. For a good example of this, there was an excellent piece by William Perry, who is Bill Clinton's defense secretary. Okay. He said how the U.S. lost Russia and how we can restore relations. And he talks about how we can chart a way forward for peace, which I think is your question. What Perry points out, remember, again, he was Clinton's defense secretary in the 1990s. He almost resigned in protest over NATO expansion eastward. This was basically a contradiction of the verbal assurances that James Baker and President George Herbert Walker Bush had given Gorbachev that we would not expand NATO 1 inch eastward. In any event, that's when NATO expansion began, was the late 90s. Perry was against it because, like George Kennan, like former ambassador to the Soviet Union, James Matlock, he understood that it would be provocative. It would be seen as a provocative move by Russia. Okay, he was against that policy. The other thing he points out is that in the 1990s, the Russian economy collapsed because they moved off of the Soviet system, and we did absolutely nothing to help them. As a result of that, we bred the conditions for a strong man to emerge who would basically prioritize the restoration of Russian pride, dignity, and strength, okay? So he points out the ways that our policies help create Putin. I think what he basically suggests in terms of the way forward is, look, we have to realize that the security architecture of Europe was crafted in the late 90s and early 2000s at a time when Russia was flat on its back, okay? What are the Russians basically demanding? What were their demands prior to this war? There were two things they really didn't like, okay? Number one was they didn't
NATO at their doorstep. We've been over this, yes.
They didn't want Ukraine admitted to NATO. And then number two is they didn't want American missiles right on their border that could hit Moscow in 5 minutes, okay? Those were their two demands. The fact of the matter is we never were willing to negotiate at all on those two demands, at all. And instead, we basically just claimed they were a pretext by the Russians for an invasion. Well, look, we never earned the right to call those a pretext. If you want to call them a pretext, you take those issues off the table. Then if the Russians invade, you know they're liars. The truth of the matter is we refused to negotiate in any way.
We never played that move, and so we'll never know. I don't disagree with you about that point. Okay, the big lesson here is they need the European Union needs to learn the lesson of
Jason,
energy independence and not spending more money.
Hold on, I want to keep going with this because I think this issue is so much deeper. Okay, listen. One of the problems we have in this country is that when a war doesn't work out, we just ghost it. We never talk about Afghanistan anymore. We never talk about Iraq anymore. We understand they were gigantic mistakes, but who is analyzing why they happened? Who's responsible for the failure? The fact of the matter is there's been no accountability. The same people who drove our disastrous foreign policy in the Middle East are the same people who have driven our Ukraine policy in Eastern Europe. There is no accountability.
Industrial military concept?
Not just that, it's the foreign policy elite in this country, okay?
So my point is this.
Okay. So my point is this.
And you're
it sounds to me like you're willing to now say, what compromise can we find to get out of this war, okay? My point is...
that way since I've been trying to avoid war from the beginning. I do think we did not play the piece of, hey, if NATO is not here, if we don't let them in NATO and we take that off the table, will you move these troops back from the border? And we don't know if they ever offered that or not. But
no, we do now. Actually, there was new information that came out of the last couple of weeks. Okay,
obviously they should have offered that. I mean, the real issue here is dependency on dictators for energy. Because if he did not have the ability to yank that gas chain, if he didn't have that Nord, he would be neutered right now.
Okay, but we knew that. So if you're playing,
you're not even saying it accurately. It's not that if he didn't have Nord, that doesn't exist without an entire other counterparty agreeing to it.
I agree. If Germany had kept their nukes going, and if they had made other plans, perhaps with the Middle East for oil, or the United States.
So
I mean, if we had
and don't forget, Biden canceled our energy independence the first day he was in office.
It doesn't matter that it's a dictator on the other side. There is a dependency on the other side, and that is an issue.
I've been for energy independence since the beginning. I've been talking about nuclear since the beginning. For decades, I've been talking about it.
But J-Cal, one of the challenges is if everyone creates independency on all of their supply, then there is no export market for countries that benefit from exports because they have a surplus. And so we see this around the world with food, with energy, with manufacturing.
Would that be a bad thing with oil? That would be a good thing with oil, wouldn't it? If there was no market for it?
If there was no market for oil, then a lot of countries that do not have energy stocks locally would not be able to acquire energy stocks. And so more free, more global... It doesn't make sense.
If you're saying if we lowered our use of oil, that would make it cheaper, which means that developing countries would pay less.
Jake, just let me finish my point for 1 second. In every country, you are either an importer or an exporter. You're an importer of manufactured goods or an exporter of manufactured goods. You're an importer of energy, you're an exporter of energy, an importer of food, an exporter of food. It doesn't matter. And we often use this as a way to characterize the leadership at these countries as being bad when we end up in conflict with them. It doesn't matter that this person is, that there's an autocracy on the other side, or if there's a democracy on the other side. At the end of the day, if there's a global trade agreement, if there's a supply agreement, and that supply agreement gets broken, it's both parties' fault for being dependent on the supply agreement and then allowing conflict to ensue.
I don't think what you're saying is accurate, and I'll explain why. Reasonable parties who are democracies, if they get into a trade dispute, generally do not invade each other's countries. So that's where your argument breaks down. It would be absolutely fantastic if the lesson the European Union learned here was, let's not be dependent.
What did the United States do to Afghanistan?
Autocrats. Hold on.
What did the United States do to Iraq?
Okay.
Did we not invade those countries?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the dependency.
No, that is what you
Libya
just said.
too.
You said that democracies do not invade. And Libya.
No, I said
we
two
did
democracies.
Invade, and we
two
are
democracies. Two democracies that are in a trade war are generally not going to invade each other. We invaded Afghanistan because of 9/11. Okay, and the first Iraq war, we protected Kuwait, right? And so, I'm not here to justify every war the United States has been in. I'm just talking about in this situation, the EU lowering their dependency. And if you were going to lower your dependency on any country, you'd start with the autocratic ones. You'd start with the dictatorships. Is that not logical to you, Friedberg, or a fair statement?
There was a neoliberal view. Hold on a second. There was a neoliberal view. I'd say core to neoliberalism. It's called economic interdependence theory, which is that as nations become more interdependent with each other, they're less likely to go to war.
China was the perfect example, right?
China was the perfect example. There was also a belief that as China became richer, they become more democratic. That hasn't worked out so well.
No.
I'd say economic interdependence theory hasn't worked out so well either. Yeah. So this is a core failing. Now you're modifying the theory to say, well, only economic interdependence among democracies, fine. But that was not the view. That was not the view for the last 20 years. It was a core tenet of neoliberalism.
We don't know if we've avoided war with China because of the dependency.
If we make ourselves dependent on these other countries, then somehow it's going to lead to peace. No, it actually has just led to dependency. It was a foolish policy. We should have been energy independent. Europe should have been energy independent.
They should not have made them.
I do agree that it was foolish for them.
We're in agreement. Yes, you're disagreeing with Friedberg. Got it. Okay.
No, I'm not disagreeing with Friedberg. I think, but
by the way, I'm not a proponent of people not being energy independent. The reason I think people can be energy independent today is because of technology like nuclear. And I think that every country in the world should find a way to get energy independent. I'm also an advocate of global trade. I am an advocate because I think that global trade enables economic progress. It allows the consumer to get the cheapest product possible and for the producer to find a market for the products that they make. And that there's an element of this, which is energy, but energy doesn't need to be a traded market as much anymore because of technology. Manufactured goods, food, we still haven't cracked the nut on how to bring those domestic.
We are then in agreement, Friedberg.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is sort of an ancillary point, but I just want to say that historically, there's been no basis for believing in economic interdependence theory. If you go back to World War I, Germany and the UK were each other's largest trading partners before World War I, didn't stop them from getting into war. World War II, I think Russia's biggest trading partner was Germany up until the moment when Hitler invaded them. So listen, economic interdependence has never
madman theory.
It doesn't.
Right?
Yeah, but the point is there's very little historical basis for believing that economic interdependence prevents wars. Which by the way, that really speaks to the foolishness of our China policy. But look, this is sort of a side issue.
Can I ask you a question, Sachs, though, with the China policy? Because I think this is a very important discussion we've discovered, which is energy independence is one thing, and then you have trade, which is another. And does this actually push off wars? Do we actually know that we might have actually pushed off a war with China because we make iPhones together? Could we have been in a conflict earlier if we weren't so independent? And have we actually pushed out a potential conflict with Taiwan, et cetera, Hong Kong, because of the interdependency?
With the benefit of hindsight, what we can see, with the benefit of hindsight, what we can see is that our Chinese policy of interdependency really was called constructive engagement, was a complete and unmitigated disaster.
It was.
Why? It was because we made China rich. You go back to the beginning of Deng Xiaoping beginning his economic reforms. The average Chinese made $2 a day. Now their economy is roughly the same size as ours. And how are they using their newfound economic wealth to build up their military, their navy? They're basically militarizing the South China Sea. They're basically being aggressive towards their neighbors. We fed that Chinese tiger until it became a dragon that was capable of challenging us for global preeminence. That was a foolish strategy. The fact of the matter is that, and listen, this is a mistake that economists make, is that they only look at whether trade creates surplus as opposed to the distribution of those benefits. And the fact of the matter is that China benefited disproportionately, far more than we did, from the China trade over the last 20 years.
The counter argument we've made on this podcast is, I think Freeberg made it, is that we lifted 500 million people, I think I made it as well, out of abject poverty in China. But as to your point, it's going towards
we have created the return of great power rivalry. We have created a competitor to the US who has roughly almost our same size economy, and that is going to challenge us for primacy in Asia.
We need diplomacy. We need very sophisticated diplomacy, because this situation with China, it's not a clear path.
Why is it that you think that we need diplomacy with China when we didn't need it with Russia?
No, I do think we did. I fully conceded that we should have taken NATO off the table. I said that from day one.
Listen, it's really important to not just say that, we failed to play chess here, that this policy isn't working. Like, let's not forget how we got into this conflict. We got into this conflict because the administration said, I think there were 4 main pillars to our current Ukraine strategy. Number one, that Ukraine could basically defeat Russia if we basically just gave them weapons. That has not happened yet. Number two, the administration said that sanctions would weaken Russia, maybe even destabilize its leadership and collapse its economy. That has not happened. The ruble's at an all-time high. And because gas prices have gone up so much, their economy has suffered, but on the whole, it's still doing pretty well. The third contention that was made by advocates of this proxy war is that the sanctions would hurt Russia more than Europe. That has not happened. Europe is already hurting more than Russia. And it's about, with winter coming, it's going to hurt even more. And then the last contention that was made, our support for Ukraine would rally the world around us and would strengthen the Western alliance. And I think what we're starting to see is that the Western alliance is fracturing. And you see these gigantic protests in Prague and these other countries. So listen, these were the pillars of our Ukraine policy, and they have all turned out to be flawed and wrong, and they're becoming more wrong by the day. And yet there is no reappraisal of our policy that's coming out of Washington or London or Paris. None of these leaders are saying that there's a problem. So I think we're headed for not just an economic crisis, but a political crisis in Europe because of the fundamental tension between the needs of these people, which is to basically preserve their economy and to stay warm in their homes, and the ideology of their leaders who are fanatically committed to waging a proxy war against Russia instead of finding a diplomatic outcome that was available last year. It was available in January. It was even available in March or April. That disconnect is the fundamental problem.
All right, let's go. Come on, let's talk about Kim K. Come on.
There's no word on how much money she's raised for her private equity from Russian oligarchs. But Kim will serve as co-founder and co-managing partner. The firm was co-founded with 16-year Carlyle veteran Jay Sammons, who will run day-to-day ops. And people may not know this, but Kim founded Skims. That's her undergarment company in 2019. It was last valued at $3.2 billion. She is obviously got the largest following and is the biggest influencer in the world, 329 million followers on Instagram alone. Our friend, Gavin Baker, responded with a tweet.
Mr. Beast actually just passed him.
Okay, so those are two examples of people who can put a consumer packaged good in the world and make it number one instantly. Gavin Baker, a friend of ours, tweeted that she adds massive value in this exact regard. What do you think, boys? Is she going to have?
Here's why I think this is so important.
Go.
I have a really strong belief that in the next 30 years or so, all traditional brands are going to die, and I think that what we're seeing happening right now with the power of democratized media, like us creating a podcast, there are hundreds and now thousands of individuals who have stood up and created their own brand and their own presence because of the content that they create on Twitch, on Twitter, on YouTube, etc., on podcasting. And as a result, they become the trusted sources of influence, and it's why they're called influencers. And ultimately, these influencers are becoming the brands. They can, like Mr. Beast launched a chocolate bar, became like the #1 chocolate bar in the country. He just opened up a burger restaurant last week.
10,000 people showed up.
#1, no, more than that, like 100,000 or something. It was insane. It was like the #1 burger restaurant opening, or #1 restaurant opening in history. Kylie Jenner launches a makeup brand, takes off, becomes this $1 billion brand. Kim Kardashian launches a clothing brand, becomes a $3 billion brand. These are not just brands, they're businesses. And here's what I think is the most prescient M&A transaction of 2022. And you guys can tell me I'm crazy. I think the most important M&A deal of 2022 was when Penn Gaming bought Barstool Sports. Because it shows that every consumer packaged good or every consumer services business ultimately needs to be a content business. And if you don't naturally have content creation in your blood, you have to go and buy a content business or you are going to die. And that's why I think all traditional brands that aren't oriented and built around content creation as their primary differentiating foundation will not survive and will not be able to compete effectively. And instead, what we're going to see is influencers and individuals that create content, build and distribute consumer goods and consumer services in a more efficient way, because guess what? They've got distribution built in. Distribution is the #1 problem with all consumer services and all consumer goods. So I think in the future, all advertising and marketing gets replaced by content creation. And content creation direct to consumers through the social media platforms becomes the mechanism by which people are aware of and buy goods and services.
Chamath,
so that's why I think this deal is so important. And I think it's another one of what we're seeing in 2022, which is the stacking away towards the end of nameless, faceless brands and the evolution of the influencer.
I think Kim Kardashian is incredible. She is an incredible businesswoman. And the fact that she can stand up what will probably be like a multi-billion-dollar private equity fund. And frankly, the companies that she invests in has a really compelling chance of being successful, because she can basically pour so much visibility and notoriety and awareness of a brand into that company, that cap table. If I was a director, I would say, of course, give her whatever she wants. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I would say is that I think what Friedberg says is completely right. I think we're at a point in time where the biggest thing that, if you want to build a consumer business, my advice to you as an entrepreneur is you need to build direct distribution and scale. Because what that translates into, what Kim Kardashian proves, what Mr. Beast is proving, is it's all about subsidized CAC, where you don't customer acquisition, where you are not paying dollars to Facebook and Google, but instead, because you have direct distribution and a relationship with tens or hundreds of millions of users, you can pour them into different experiences. And when you can do that at basically virtually zero cost, your entire margin structure of how you build a consumer business has changed overnight. So that's what they've proven. They've proven that you need to first build a brand, and then you can convert that brand into a distribution funnel, and then to basically pour all kinds of services into it. And one of the services, as it turns out, is now a private equity fund. So I think it's incredible, and I hope she's super successful.
Sachs, do you think this influencer strategy is here for and going to have a major impact on the venture business?
I think it's pretty interesting.
We're soaking in it, but
I think it's pretty interesting in the consumer space for the reason Friedberg said, which is distribution is so hard. So creating a great product is hard. Distribution is even harder. And this is a realization I had many years ago, and which is when I started doing Yammer, and then Kraft started focusing on SaaS, which is, at least when you do a B2B product, a software as a service, you can charge enough money for it that you can get a sales team to pencil. So in other words, you charge an enterprise enough money for the software that you can then pay a salesperson to go out and sell it. So there was always a distribution model built in for B2B. And that's why I've always liked that, is there's a playbook there where if you just build a good enough piece of enterprise software, a good enough product, there's always going to be distribution for it. However, that's not true with consumer, because consumer products are usually ad-based. You can't generally charge that much if you can charge at all. They have high churn rates. And so therefore, B2C only works if you can find a very low cost, scalable distribution channel. And I think that's what, to Freeberg's point, I think that's what the Kardashians are offering. It's clearly worked for their own products. I guess we'll see how extensible it is. But this is really the key challenge with all consumer stuff, is just how do you find a very cheap way of distributing it? In the past, the consumer products I've been involved in, like PayPal or investing in social networks like Facebook, they were viral. Then they were exponentially viral. So they were able to basically grow virally for free. So you either have to have, extraordinary virality to the product or some other distribution trick that allows you to scale at low cost because you can't afford a sales team.
And what we're seeing is the base of doing that is to create content. Mr. Beast created content for years before he built a big enough audience to do that. Kim Kardashian did content for years before she had a distribution to do that. Dave Portnoy and Barstool Sports. I mean, the guy, Dave Portnoy, and this is incredible. Jason Calacanis, yeah, seriously. I mean, Portnoy was out rating pizza. And, now he has all these other kind of, media and content kind of branches of his platform, but it's all content creation. And on top of that content
not
creation,
everybody's good at it, Freeberg. That's the other problem.
I get it, but that's not what I'm saying. And that's my point. So let's say Coca-Cola tried to build a content business today. How good would they be? Not very good. That's why they're going to end up dying, or they're going to end up needing to buy.
That's a really interesting concept. I mean, do you think Mr. Beast Burger could beat McDonald's?
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. That's my point. That's why I opened up.
That's kind of insane when you think about it. If Mr. Beast had 5,000 franchisees.
Yeah, but this is exactly my point that I said at the beginning. Every traditional brand will get destroyed in 30 years. And they will get destroyed by the influencers that have built an audience through content creation and now creating businesses on top of that compete with the traditional incumbents, not technology advantage businesses. I'm talking about core consumer goods and services.
They also have to be good,
Penn
though.
Penn Gaming does betting. There's no real advantage in betting. You build a sports book, that's it. The reason Penn Gaming bought Barstool is they now have an audience that they can drive to their sports books, right? And so the same will happen with
still
Mr.
have to
Beast
make
Burger.
a great product, though. I mean, that's the other challenge here is, can you also be a product savant? Can you be a virtuoso in building a product in addition to being an influencer?
Yeah,
I think that's what Kim gets right. She makes great product. And Mr. Beast, his first burger was not good, but now this new burger, from what I understand, is awesome. So you have to have both things switched on.
But think about what's easier and what's harder. What's easier? Building an audience of 2 billion or 1 billion people that listen or watch you every week, or building a great burger? It's a lot harder to build the audience.
Yeah.
And
Depends
so what'll
on the
happen,
product.
you'll
If it's
bring
a
in
car,
a chef.
if it's a car, it's really hard.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not talking about complicated cars and stuff or electronics. I'm talking about basic consumer goods: cereal, beverages, food.
Sure, why not? Commodity,
music, audio, like all the stuff that's commodity. Betting. I mean, this is not
chocolate bar.
Betting is not a differentiated service offering to consumers. So ultimately, how do you differentiate? It's the audience that you've now built, the brand that you've built through the audience because of content creation. And so this is why I just want to point out, distributed content creation, I think, represents one of the most profound investing opportunities over the next decade. Because if you can give individuals the ability to make high quality content, they can scale an audience that now can be monetized in 1,000 ways, not just putting friggin' ad spots on YouTube, but there's 1,000 products you as an influencer can build on top of your audience or sell to your audience. Boom. It really changes the whole landscape for CPG and services.
And not to bring everything back to Mr. Beast, but a large number of his videos, he told us, he lost money on. So the videos at some point started losing him money, and it was an investment in that brand. And, it's clearly going to pay off now. I saw Alexis Ohanian from, Reddit fame and venture capitalist, 776 is new fund. He went to go see the burger place, and he's like, what? Like, there were, at that point in time, 10,000 people online. Mr. Beast had to tell people, please do not show up, which of course, then 20,000 people show up. Anybody have plugs or anything that they want to get off their chest? Sachs, anything else? I do. Hug it out with you? Okay, we got a plug.
I do. There is an epidemic right now of the overprescription of amphetamines to children who are diagnosed with ADHD.
It's terrible.
It is an enormously important issue that doesn't just touch kids anymore, but now also touches adults. You've seen a lot of really kind of bad companies that are overprescribing this stuff get shut down and get sanctioned. So I just wanted to let anybody who's listening know, and this is me talking my book, so take this with a grain of salt, but there's a company that I'm involved in that has a video game that has been approved by the FDA to be a useful treatment for kids who have been diagnosed with ADHD. So if you have an 8 to 11-year-old, you can go and talk to your pediatrician to find out about this solution. It's called Achille, and it will allow you to prescribe to them a video game that they play 30 minutes a day.
I just want to make sure people hear the name. It's Achille, A-K-I-L-I. So if you would do a Google search for Achille, A-K-I-L-I, interactive, you'll find it.
Go talk to your pediatrician. If you are a parent with a child that's dealing with this issue, go and read the label, have the doctor decide. Okay, so I'm not telling you to go do this, but I'm asking you
look into it. To you, just look into it.
But the idea is that there are drugs that affect your brain, and now we are increasingly able to design software that exquisitely targets certain aspects of your brain and are able to train them. And this is really the first example of such a thing that the FDA, who has reviewed all kinds of clinical data, has decided to approve. And so it's launching in the next few weeks. We've already written prescriptions to kids in every single state of the United States. And so to the extent that you're deciding what to do, or you have a child, or you have somebody in your family that is of age, 8 to 11 years old, that's dealing with this, I would just encourage you to learn about it. That is a plug, and all the disclaimers.
I know it's a great plug. I think we should, at the end, just talk about some of the things we're working on, and this is an incredible one. The number of kids on these, ADHD drugs, attention drugs, depression drugs, anxiety drugs, it is out of control. There is, and I don't want to tell parents how to parent, but I will say this is becoming a dependency, and the number of drugs. I don't know if you saw that New York Times story where they put this one girl on 10 drugs. They're prescribing multiple drugs, and we don't know exactly what the long-term effects of children using these are. And there are other solutions. I'm not judging any parent. I'm not judging any teachers who's advising this, but this country and a society needs to really look deeply at this issue and say, should children, because we didn't go on these drugs when we were kids, they didn't exist, and they haven't existed for all of humanity. And we need to think, what kind of experiment are we running on 10, 20, 30% of kids in some schools?
You're stating something so incredibly important. When you have kids that are preteens and teenagers, their physiology is changing dramatically. And all of a sudden, when you introduce a secondary chemical compound into all of that, you're exactly right. We don't really know what the outcomes are. And right now, I think a lot of people are worried that the overprescription of drugs in this kind of condition is going to create a next version of an opioid pandemic or epidemic. And I think that's the thing.
That's exactly the analogy, Chamath. Right now, this statistic is crazy. This is in the New York Times. Express Scripts, a mail order pharmacy, recently reported that prescriptions of antidepressants for teenagers rose 38% from 2015 to 2029. We are prescribing these at an alarming rate. I have many parents in my circle who have kids who had what I would consider modest behavioral issues or modest attention issues. And they talked to me about this, and they felt in multiple cases like they were being bullied or pressured by teachers to put their kids on behavioral drugs because their kids were behaving 10% as badly as I did in middle school or high school. This is being used, I believe, this is my personal belief. I know there are some kids who need these drugs, or I assume that there are, but I think this is being used to keep kids in their seats and to make it easier for parents to have to deal with what are normally the hardships of teenagers. And just be very careful, parents, about the extent to which you might be being pressured. Perhaps parents have told me they felt bullied into giving their kids these drugs. It really is infuriating to me. And I think it's really great that you made the investment. People should look into it. Exercise, talking to your kids, these things also work.
We had a guidance counselor. We had a guidance counselor at our school tell me that they thought that one of my children should just get put on these drugs. And I was like, it was the most random statement. And all I could get from her was that she just didn't want to deal with the fact that every now and then this kid would just, be exuberant.
Yeah.
To your point.
They want to kill their spirit. I had the same conversation. I don't want to get into it too much, but, I think that these teachers now, and I'm not saying it's all teachers, they are like, it's just easier to manage kids who are on focused energy drugs. And then there are some parents who want their kids to do really good on standardized testing. I would have done better on standardized testing if I was on Adderall or whatever these attention drugs are. Everybody would score 10% better. But what does it do to the quality of your life long term? That's the question we need to ask about this stuff. And we don't have answers for it. I don't want to be Tom Cruise on this podcast, but there are other ways to keep, kids healthy and to deal with these issues. And I think these things are, to say they're overprescribed is going to be a huge understatement. We're going to look at this like the opioid crisis. I guarantee it. I think that's exactly, if you saw Dope Sick, right? And people thought they were doing the right thing. Oh, these people have pain. This drug manages pain. And then they found out like, oh yeah, you know what? This drug also could make you an addict and could ruin your life. Great job on that investment. And I hope it works.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sachs, anything else, any companies in your portfolio you want to give a shout out to? We might as well get something out of this fucking pod since we're leaving $7.5 million on the fucking table. And you guys won't even let me run All In Summit too, so I can get a $500,000.
I don't have anything to plug right now, but
no company you invested in, you need a plug for. How about you? Supergut, can we get some supergut.com in here? These bars taste great, Friedberg. I love the Supergut.
Thank you.
I literally just ordered another pack of them.
I'm glad. Thank you.
They're
it's delicious.
A great product. Supergut. Do you have supergut.com?
By the way, this is where I'm having, supergut.com, but this is actually one of my D2C companies where I'm having a lot of these conversations about how do you actually avoid just buying ads on Facebook and Google, and how do you actually build an audience, right? How do you ultimately convert your customers by creating content? And so
this was originally unique, right? And then you changed the brand.
Right. Yeah. Based on the science around resistant starch and how it changes the gut biome. And so, but this is general. I'm on the board of a couple of D2C companies, and it is universally the conversation right now. Because in the last year, the cost of D2C direct-to-consumer marketing on Facebook and Google
it's brutal.
Doubled, tripled, and a lot of the unit economics are falling apart on D2C businesses because of it. Costs a lot more to acquire the customer than you make from them. And so everyone's scrambling to figure out, okay, how do I acquire customers? And that's where this content creation strategy is becoming a critical linchpin for most consumer businesses now. It's a really important part of the business.
I think a couple of us are investors in 8 Sleep, and they were like, please let us advertise on All In. I was like, sorry, no ads, but I'll shout you out here. 8 Sleep. It's a great product.
I have a plug, but I want to save it. So
fucking drop a plug for once.
No, the product hasn't launched yet. Ooh. Give me like a month.
All right.
Hey, yo.
And if anybody wants to be a venture investor, jason@calacanis.com to come to one of my webinars and see my latest fund.
Since when did we start allowing all of these plugs? I thought we had
it was a setup. It was a setup. I just wanted to do a roundup of plugs so I could get mine in. So I was being generous. Plan worked. I got you on the hook for yours.
What was your plug? What were you doing? Your venture fund?
I'm doing Launch Fund 4.
And if we're plugging stuff,
I'll be oversubscribed.
I'll plug the
jason@calacanis.com if you want to.
Call-in app. We're all investors.
Everybody use call-in
app.
You know what we should do a call-in? We should all do like an after hours where we take questions from the audience. That would be great.
I would do that.
Yeah,
I would do that. Can I get a point? All right, let's go. Everybody, this has been All In episode 95.
Wait. Should we do that?
Let's create more bad
Hold on a
feelings.
second. Jake Al, that was another deal you turned down, just like the Ukraine deal. This is a theme here, is that you turn down deals you later regret, and then 9 months later you admit I was right. 9 months later you admit I was right. You should have taken the deal.
I should have taken the call-in deal.
Look how hard Chamath is crashing right now. Look at him. Look at him.
What time is it there?
It's like 11:30, right? Midnight?
It's 11:30. It's 11:30.
That's okay.
I'm losing my voice. I lost my voice. I lost my voice this morning.
Send us an invite for AMA for the 4 of us on Call-In.
Call-In.
I'll do that.
Everybody download
Call-In. We should do that. Okay.
Yeah, just remember all
like after this episode drops, maybe?
Yeah, live AMA.
Live AMA with the Besties.
I'm going to show up for it. Jake, you show up or don't?
I'll show up. Okay. Maybe I'll show up for Sachs one.
I'll show up. I'll show up. I'd be happy to do it. I'm back in the United States tomorrow.
All right. Well, then we'll play poker in 14 hours. In 2 hours after you get here, you're going to ask everybody to come play poker.
We'll meet you at the airport. We'll pick you up from the airport.
We'll pick up at the airport. We'll play Chinese poker in the back of the car. All right, everybody. It's been episode 95. Better than we thought it would be.
Suck a lozenge, Chamath. You need something.
A little honey tea.
I need a lozenge. I have some tea over there.
Get a little honey.
I love you guys.
Love you, besties. See you soon.
We'll let your winners ride.
Rain Man David Sachs.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you, Bestie. Queen of Quinoa. Besties are gone.
What?
We need to get merch.
I'm going all in.